Chapter 4: How to Dehypnotize Yourself from False Beliefs. Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. Friedrich Nietzsche. A question I have been asked many times about Psycho-Cybernetics equates as if imagination with fake it till you make it, or pure fantasy. Nothing could be further from the truth. Fake it till you make it is external, superficial, and unrealistic. It's sometimes taught to salespeople to their financial and emotional detriment. Instead, Psycho-Cybernetics, including as-if imagination practice, is not about fraud, but a search for a hidden truth. It is about uncovering your true self by creatively challenging your ideas and self-image that accepts the facts about you, and it may not have been valid once and need not be valid today or tomorrow. This story from my original book illustrates this. My friend, Dr. Alfred Adler, had an experience with a young boy that illustrates just how powerful belief can be on behavior and ability. He got off to a bad start in arithmetic, and his teacher became convinced that he was, quote, dumb in mathematics. The teacher then advised his parents of this fact and told them not to expect much of him. They too were convinced. Adler passively accepted the evaluation they had placed on him, and his grades in arithmetic proved they had been correct. One day, however, he had a sudden flash of insight and thought he saw how to work a problem that the teacher had put on the board and that none of the other pupils could work out. He announced as much to the teacher. She and the whole class laughed, whereupon he became indignant, strode to the blackboard, and worked the problem, much to their amazement. In doing so, he realized that he could understand arithmetic. He felt a new confidence in his ability and went on to become a good math student. Dr. Adler's experience was very much like that of a patient of mine some years back, a business person who wanted to excel in public speaking because he had a vital message to impart about his outstanding success in a difficult field. He had a good voice and an important topic, but he was unable to get up in front of strangers and put his message over. What held him back was his belief that he could not make a good talk and that he would fail to impress his audience simply because he didn't have an imposing appearance. He did not look like a successful executive. This belief had buried so deep into him that it threw up a roadblock every time he stood before a group of people and began to talk. He mistakenly concluded that if he could have an operation to improve his appearance, he would then gain the confidence he needed. An operation might have done the trick, and it might not. My experience with other patients has shown that physical change did not always guarantee personality change. The solution in this man's case was found when he became convinced that his negative belief was preventing him from delivering the vital information he had. He succeeded in replacing the negative belief with a positive belief that he had a message of extreme importance that he alone could deliver no matter what he looked like. In due time, he was one of the most sought-after speakers in the business world. The change was in his belief and in his self-image. Now, the point I want to make is this. Adler had been hypnotized by a false belief about himself, not figuratively, but literally and actually hypnotized. Remember that we had said in the last chapter that the power of hypnosis is the power of belief. Let me repeat here Dr. Barber's explanation of the power of hypnosis. We found that hypnotic subjects are able to do surprising things only when convinced that the hypnotist's words are true statements. When the hypnotist has guided the subject to the point where he is convinced that the hypnotist's words are true statements, the subject then behaves differently because he thinks and behaves differently. The important thing for you to remember is that it does not matter in the least how you got the idea or where it came from. You may never have met a professional hypnotist. You may never have been formally hypnotized. But if you have accepted an idea from yourself, your teachers, your parents, friends, advertisements, or any other source, and further, if you are firmly convinced that the idea is true, it has the same power over you as the hypnotist's words have over the hypnotized subject. Scientific research has shown that Dr. Adler's experience was not one in a million, but typical of practically all students who make poor grades. In Chapter 1, we told how Prescott Leckie had brought about miraculous improvement in grades of school children by showing them how to change their self-image. After thousands of experiments and thousands of experiments and many years of research, Lecky concluded that poor grades in school are in almost every case due to some degree students' self-conception and self-definition. These students had literally been hypnotized by ideas such as, I am dumb, I am poor in arithmetic, I am naturally a poor speller, I do not have a mechanical type of mind, etc. With such definitions, students had to make poor grades in order to be true to themselves. Unconsciously, making poor grades became a moral issue with them. It would be as wrong from their viewpoint to make good grades as it would be to steal if they define themselves as honest. Remember that this hypnotic programming gains permanence by coming from an authoritative source through repetition and through intensity. Deprogramming and reprogramming requires you to provide these very same factors. Dr. Adler's childhood experience included authoritative sources, his parents and teachers, hearing it repeatedly and having it reinforced through intensely humiliating experience. His liberation began with another intense experience and emotional reaction, which freed him and motivated him to question and challenge the belief. Chapter 4. The Case of the Hypnotized Salesperson. In the book, Secrets of Successful Selling, John D. Murphy tells how the famous sales expert Elmer Wheeler used Lecky's theory to increase the earnings of a certain salesperson. Elmer Wheeler had been called in as a sales consultant to a certain firm. The sales manager called his attention to a very remarkable case. A certain salesman always managed to make almost exactly $5,000 per year, regardless of the territory they assigned him or the commission he was paid. Because this salesman had done well in a rather small territory, he had been given a larger and much better one. But the next year, his commission amounted to almost the same amount he had made in the smaller one, $5,000. The year following, the company increased the commission paid to all salesmen, but this salesman still managed to make only $5,000. He was then assigned one of the company's poorest territories, and again made the usual $5,000. Wheeler had a talk with this salesman and found that the trouble was not in the territory, but in the salesman's own evaluation of himself. He thought of himself as a $5,000 per year man, and as long as he held that concept of himself, outside conditions didn't seem to matter much. When he was assigned a poor territory, he worked hard to make that $5,000. When he was assigned a good territory, he found all sorts of excuses to coast when the $5,000 was in sight. Once, when the goal had been reached, he got sick and was unable to work any more that year, although doctors could find nothing wrong with him, and he miraculously recovered by the first of the next year. Obviously, that's an odd story, dated, and an old story, dated by the 5,000 earnings number. After it first appeared in this book, I began to get letters about this story from sales manager after sales manager, each citing a similar story. They all would say they had a person just like that in their organization with whom they were frustrated beyond all belief. One sales manager wrote, "It's as if Howard has a preset income limit that he will not go past no matter the opportunities or circumstances." And that is exactly right. It is set deep in his self-image. Until he is reset, he will manage to avoid going past it. How a false belief aged a man 20 years. In my previous book, Adventures in Staying Young, I gave a detailed case history of how Mr. Russell aged 20 years almost overnight because of a false idea, then regained his youth almost as quickly as when he accepted the truth. Briefly, the story is this. I performed a cosmetic operation on Mr. Russell's lower lip for a very modest fee, under the condition that he must tell his girlfriend that the operation had cost him his entire lifetime savings. His girlfriend had no objection to spending his money on her, and she insisted that she loved him, but explained she could never marry him because of his too large lower lip. However, when he told her this and proudly exhibited his new lower lip, her reaction was just as I had expected, not as Mr. Russell had anticipated. She became hysterically angry, called him a fool for having spent all his money, and advised him in no uncertain terms that she never loved him and she never would. She had merely played him for a sucker as long as he had money to spend on her. However, she went further than I had counted on. In her anger and disgust, she also announced that she was placing a voodoo curse on him. Both Mr. Russell and his girlfriend had been born on an island in the West Indies where voodoo was practiced by the ignorant and superstitious. His family had been rather well-to-do. His background was one of culture, and he was a college graduate. When, in the heat of anger, his girlfriend cursed him, he felt vaguely uncomfortable but did not think too much about it. However, he remembered and wondered when a short time later he felt a strange small bump on the inside of his lip. A friend who knew of the voodoo curse insisted that he see a Dr. Smith, who promptly assured him that the bump on the inside of his mouth was the feared African bug, which would slowly eat away all of his vitality and strength. Mr. Russell began to worry and look for signs of waning strength. He was not long in finding them. He lost his appetite and his ability to sleep. I learned all of this from Mr. Russell when he returned to my office several weeks after I had dismissed him. My nurse didn't recognize him, and no wonder. The Mr. Russell who had first called upon me had been a very impressive individual, slightly too large lip and all. He stood about 6'4", a man with the physique of an athlete and bearing and manner that bespoke of an inner dignity and gave him a magnetic personality. The very pores of his skin seemed to exude an animal-like vitality. The Mr. Russell who now sat across the desk from me had aged at least 20 years. His hands shook with the tremor of age. His eyes and cheeks were sunken. He had lost perhaps 30 pounds. The changes in his appearance were all characteristic of the process that medical science, for want of a better name, calls aging. After a quick examination of his mouth, I assured Mr. Russell that I could get rid of the African bug in less than 30 minutes, which I did. The bump, which had caused all the trouble, was merely a bit of scar tissue from his operation. I removed it, held it in my hand, and showed it to him. The important thing is he saw the truth and believed it. He gave a sigh of relief, and it seemed as if there was an almost immediate change in his posture and expression. Several weeks later, I received a nice letter from Mr. Russell, together with a photograph of him with his new bride. He had gone back to his home and married his childhood sweetheart. The man in the picture was the first Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell had grown young again overnight. A false belief aged him 20 years. The truth had not only set him free of fear and restored his confidence, but actually reversed the aging process. If you could have seen Mr. Russell as I did, both before and after, you would never again entertain any doubts about the power of belief, or that an idea accepted as true from any source can be every bit as powerful as hypnosis. Is everyone hypnotized? It is no exaggeration to say that all human beings are hypnotized to some extent. either by ideas they have uncritically accepted from others, or by ideas they have repeated to themselves or convinced themselves are true. These negative ideas have exactly the same effect on our behavior as the negative ideas implanted into the mind of a hypnotized subject by a professional hypnotist. Have you ever seen a demonstration of honest-to-goodness hypnosis? If not, let me describe just a few of the more simple phenomena that result from the hypnotist's suggestion. The hypnotist tells a strong football player that his hand is stuck to the table and he cannot lift it. It is not a question of the football player not trying. He simply cannot. He strains and struggles until the muscles of his arm and shoulder stand out like cords, but his hand remains fully rooted to the table. He tells a champion weightlifter he cannot lift a pencil from the desk, and now, although normally he can hoist a 400-pound weight overhead, he actually cannot lift a pencil. Strangely enough, in these instances, hypnosis does not weaken the athletes. They are potentially as strong as ever. But without realizing it consciously, they are working against themselves. On one hand, they try to lift their hand or the pencil by voluntary effort and actually contract the proper lifting muscles. But on the other hand, the idea you cannot do it causes contrary muscles to contract quite apart from their will. The negative idea causes them to defeat themselves. They cannot express or bring into play their actual available strength. The gripping strength of another athlete has been tested on a dynamometer and has been found to be 100 pounds. All of his effort and straining cannot budge the needle beyond the 100-pound mark. But now he is hypnotized and he is told, "You are very strong, stronger than you have ever been in your entire life. Much, much stronger. You are surprised at how strong you are." Again, the gripping strength of his hand is tested. This time, he easily pulls the needle to the 125-pound mark. Again, strangely enough, hypnosis has not added anything to his actual strength. What the hypnotic suggestion did was to overcome a negative idea that had previously prevented him from expressing his full strength. In other words, the athlete in his normal waking state had imposed a limitation on his strength by the negative belief that he could only grip 100 pounds. The hypnotist merely removed this mental block and allowed him to express his full strength. The hypnosis literally dehypnotized him temporarily from his own self-limiting beliefs about himself. As Dr. Barber has said, it is awfully easy to assume that the hypnotist himself must have some magical power when you see rather miraculous things happen during a hypnotic session. The stutterer talks fluently. The timid, shy, retiring Casper Militost becomes outgoing, poised, and makes a stirring speech. Another individual who is not especially good at adding figures with a pencil and paper, when awake, multiplies 2 3-digit figures in his head. All this happens because a hypnotist tells them they can and instructs them to go ahead and do it. To onlookers, the hypnotist's words seem to have magical power. Such, however, is not the case. The hypnotist's words seem to have a magical power. Such, however, is not the case. The power, the basic ability to do these things was inherent in the subjects all the time before they met the hypnotist. The subjects, however, were unable to use this power because they themselves did not know it was there. They had it bottled up and choked off because of their own negative beliefs. Without realizing it, they had hypnotized themselves into believing they could not do these things. And it would be truer to say that the hypnotist had dehypnotized them than to say he had hypnotized them. Within you, whoever you may be, is the ability and the power to do whatever you need to do to be successful and happy. Within you, right now, is the power to do things you never dreamed possible. This power becomes available to you just as soon as you change your beliefs. Just as quickly you can dehypnotize yourself from the ideas of I can't, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve it, and other self-limiting ideas. You can cure your inferiority complex. At least 95% of the people have their lives blighted by feelings of inferiority to some extent. And to millions, this same feeling of inferiority is a serious handicap to their success and happiness. Every person on the face of the earth is inferior to some other person or persons. I know that I cannot beat Jack Nicklaus on the links, throw a football as straight and far as any NFL pro quarterback, and the list goes on. Even though I have appeared as a speaker on stage in front of a number of large audiences, I know there is a long list of people who are more polished and stylish and charismatic on the platform. I know this, but it does not induce feelings of inferiority within me and blight my life simply because I do not compare myself unfavorably with them and do not feel that I am no good merely because I cannot do things as skillfully or as well as they. I also know that in certain areas, every person I meet, from the newsboy on the corner to the president of the bank, is superior to me in certain respects. But neither can any of these people repair a scarred face or do any number of things as well as I. And I am sure they do not feel inferior because of it. Feelings of inferiority originate not so much from facts or experiences, but from our conclusions regarding facts and our evaluation of experiences. For example, the fact is that I am an inferior golfer to Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer. This does not, however, make me an inferior person. Arnold Palmer's inability to perform surgery makes him an inferior surgeon, but not an inferior person. It all depends on what and whose norms we measure ourselves by. It is not knowledge of actual inferiority in skill or knowledge that gives us an inferiority complex and interferes with our living. It is the feeling of inferiority that does this. And this feeling of inferiority comes about for just one reason. We judge ourselves and measure ourselves not against our own norm or par, but against some other individual's norm. When we do this, we always, without exception, come out second best. But because we think and believe and assume that we should measure up to some other person's norm, we feel miserable and second rate and conclude that there's something wrong with us. The next logical conclusion in this cockeyed reasoning process is to conclude that we are not worthy, that we do not deserve success and happiness, that it would be out of place for us to fully express our own abilities and talents, whatever they might be, without apology or without feeling guilty about it. All of this comes about because we have allowed ourselves to be hypnotized by the entirely erroneous idea that I should be like so-and-so, or I should be like everybody else. The fallacy of the second idea can be readily seen through if analyzed, but in truth, there are no fixed standards common to everybody else. Everybody else is composed of individuals, no two of whom are alike. Neither a new nose nor new shoes guarantee success. Consider the famous advertising campaign constructed around Michael Jordan with the slogan, "I want to be like Mike." The blunt truth is that very few young men have the physical talent to replicate Michael Jordan's performance, even if they replicated his remarkable discipline, commitment, work ethic, and competitive spirit. If this ad campaign harmlessly sells shoes and clothing, so be it. For some, it will serve as a positive stimulus and motivation to strive to achieve, and that is constructive. But for others, however, sadly, it will serve only to set up an impossible ideal to compare to, or worse, send young people away from the core to the circumference of being, guaranteed disappointment when they discover that a new pair of shoes has no more magic than a new nose provided by my scalpel. The more mature, intelligent observer of Michael and of this ad campaign can choose not to be adversely hypnotized by it, but to be motivated by it, look past it more thoughtfully at the characteristics and behavior other than innate exceptional physical talent that have contributed most to Michael Jordan's success. That may be uncovered in oneself, strengthened, even emulated. It is even true that a basketball player less innately physically gifted than Jordan could replicate or even surpass his success in the sport, and do so in part thanks to Jordan as inspiration. The person with an inferiority complex invariably compounds the error by striving for superiority. Her feelings spring from the false premise that she is inferior. From this false premise, a whole structure of logical thought and feeling is built. If she feels bad because she is inferior, the cure is to make herself feel as good as everybody else. And the way to make her feel really good is to make herself feel superior. This striving for superiority gets her into more trouble, causes more frustration, and sometimes brings about a neurosis where none existed before. She becomes more miserable than ever, and the harder she tries, the more miserable she becomes. Inferiority and superiority are reverse sides of the same coin. The cure lies in realizing that the coin itself is spurious. The truth about you is this: you are not inferior, you are not superior, you are simply you. You as a personality are not in competition with any other personality simply because there is not another person on the face of the earth like you or in your particular class. You are an individual. You are unique. You are not like any other person and can never become like any other person. You are not supposed to be like any other person, and no other person is supposed to be like you. God did not create a standard person in some way and label that person saying, "This is it." He made every human being individual and unique, just as He made every snowflake individual and unique. God created short people, tall people, large people and small people, skinny people and fat people, black, yellow, red, and white people. He has never indicated any preference for any one size, shape, or color. Abraham Lincoln once said, "God must have loved the common people, for He created so many of them." He was wrong. There is no common man, no standardized common pattern. Lincoln would have been nearer the truth had he said, "God must have loved uncommon people, for He made so many of them." An inferiority complex and its accompanying deterioration in performance can be made to order in the psychological laboratory. All you need to do is set up a norm or average, then convince your subject that he does not measure up. In my original book, I reported on a psychologist who wanted to find out how feelings of inferiority affected the ability to solve problems. He gave his students a set of routine tests, but then he solemnly announced that the average person could complete the test in about 1/5 of the time it would really take. When in the course of the test a bell would ring indicating that the average man's time was up, some of the brightest subjects became very jittery and incompetent indeed, thinking themselves to be morons. Imagine if you didn't know any better, being taken to the golf course for the first time, shown the basics of the game, and told that the average new player hit 80. If you were convinced this was true, how would you feel at the conclusion of your first round of golf? Or imagine if you didn't know any better and you were to enter the insurance business, convinced that the average new agent instantly began making $20,000 a month in commissions. How would you feel at the conclusion of your first month? Of your second? Also, consider the dangers of measuring yourself against a very unfair apples-to-apples standard. For example, if I were to measure my worth as an author by comparing my book's number of copies sold to novelist Tom Clancy or Stephen King, I would be comparing apples to oranges. Stop measuring yourself against their standards. You are not them and can never measure up. Neither can they measure up to yours, nor should they. As you utilize Psycho-Cybernetics to communicate with your self-image, your objective should not be to feel superior to others, nor should you continue permitting feelings of inferiority to others. Your objective is to develop your own unique personality and accomplishments. How to use relaxation to de-hypnotize yourself. Physical relaxation plays a key role in the de-hypnotization process. Our currently held beliefs, whether good, bad, true, or false, were formed without effort, with no sense of strain, without the exercise of willpower. Our habits, whether good or bad, were formed in the same way. It follows that we must employ the same process in forming new beliefs or new habits, that is, in a relaxed condition. Physical relaxation, when practiced daily, brings about an accompanying mental relaxation and a relaxed attitude, which enables us to better consciously control our automatic mechanism. Physical relaxation also in itself has a powerful influence in de-hypnotizing us from negative attitudes and reaction patterns. Mental training exercise to be practiced for at least 30 minutes daily. Seat yourself comfortably in any easy chair or lie down on your back. Consciously let go the various muscle groups as much as possible without making too much of an effort of it. Just consciously pay attention to the various parts of your body and let go a little. You will find that you can always voluntarily relax to a certain degree. You can stop frowning and let your forehead relax. You can ease up a little on the tension in your jaw. You can let your hands, arms, your shoulders, your legs become a little more relaxed than they are. Spend about 5 minutes on this and then stop paying attention to any of your muscles. This is as far as you're going to try to go by conscious control. From here on, you will relax more and more by using your creative mechanism to automatically bring about a relaxed condition. In short, you're going to use goal pictures held in your imagination and let your automatic mechanism realize those goals for you. Mental picture 1. In your mind's eye, see yourself lying stretched out upon a bed. Form a picture of your legs as they would look if made of concrete. See yourself lying there with 2 very heavy concrete legs. See these very heavy concrete legs sinking far down into the mattress from their sheer weight. Now picture your arms and hands as made of concrete. They are also very heavy and are sinking down into the bed and exerting tremendous pressure against the bed. In your mind's eye, see a friend come into the room and attempt to lift your heavy concrete legs. He takes hold of your feet and attempts to lift them, but they are too heavy for him. He cannot do it. Repeat this process with your arms, your neck, etc. Mental picture number 2. Your body is a big marionette doll. Your hands are tied loosely to your wrists by strings. Your forearm is connected loosely by a string to your upper arm. Your upper arm is connected very loosely by a string to your shoulder. Your feet, calves, thighs are also connected together with a single string. Your neck consists of one very limp string. The strings that connect your jaw and hold your lips together have slackened and stretched to such an extent that your chin has dropped down loosely against your chest. All the various strings connecting the various parts of your body are loose and limp, and your body is just sprawled loosely across the bed. Mental picture number 3. Many people will find this one the most relaxing of all. Just go back in memory to some relaxing and pleasant scene from your past. There is always some time in everyone's life when he felt relaxed, at ease, and at peace with the world. Pick out your own relaxing picture from your past and call up detailed memory images. Yours may be a peaceful scene at a mountain lake where you went fishing. If so, pay particular attention to the little incidental things in the environment. Remember the quiet ripples on the water. What sounds were present? Did you hear the quiet rustling of the leaves? Maybe you remember sitting perfectly relaxed and somewhat drowsy before an open fireplace long ago. Did the logs crackle and spark? What other sights and sounds were present? Maybe you choose to remember relaxing in the sun on a beach. How did the sand feel against your body? Could you feel the warm sun relaxing, touching your body almost as a physical thing? Was there a breeze blowing? Were there gulls on the beach? The more of these incidental things you can remember and picture to yourself, the more successful you will be. Daily practice will bring these mental pictures or memories clearer and clearer. The effect of learning will also be cumulative. Practice will strengthen the tie-in between mental image and physical sensation. You will become more and more proficient in relaxation. This in and of itself will be remembered in future practice sessions.